welcome to Nancy's Notions Wardrobe Builder 101 tutorial videos. I'm Joy Mahone, and in this lesson, we are going to focus on the Welt Pocket. Now, this particular pattern piece corresponds to the March pants video in the Wardrobe Builder video series, but we wanted to spend a little extra time focusing on the Welt Pocket, which I think just is a classy addition to any garment, and it's surprisingly easy. So let's go ahead and take a look at the steps that are needed to create your own Welt Pocket. Well, let's take a look at the components of the Welt Pocket. It's a beautiful addition to any garment. Now, depending on the fabric you choose, the results will be slightly different. This cotton fabric has a beautiful pressed under edge, and it holds a crisp press. If that's not the look you're going for, maybe you're doing a tweed skirt or a jacket, your results will look slightly different. Now, the trouser pant has a dart, which is meant to create a three-dimensional pattern piece that's going to fit around the body, and it ends just above the Welt Pocket. Now, where I have the button here, we do not want the tip of the dart to fall just below the pocket because there might be some sort of pleat or tuck, or it just might not lay very flat. Now, if you are sewing a Welt Pocket in the middle of a seam, maybe a princess seam on a jacket, for example, then that Welt Pocket going across that full seam would be appropriate. We just want to avoid the welt cutting off the tip of a dart, especially on the back of a pair of pants. Now, the components of the pocket include a pocket facing that I'm outlining here with my hand. If you look closely, you can see that through the pan. I pressed that kind of hard so that it'll kind of show through, and you can get an idea of where that lines up. That pocket facing on the back is going to prevent the pocket bag from showing through. So if we open this up, you'll see the beautiful fabric facing rather than the pocket bag fabric on the inside. And of course, you have these beautiful folded under edges that just look very classy. Now, the pattern we are using is the Sasha trouser pattern. This was a feature in the March Wardrobe Builder. So the pieces are going to correspond to the trouser, but just know that these pattern pieces actually can translate to other garments. So you've got a little versatility with your pattern. There really are only 3 pattern pieces to create a Welt Pocket, and you can make them wider or longer, more narrow, different shape. But let's just take a look at how they're put together. You have the long pocket bag, which will be folded, and in the trouser pattern, the pocket is attached to the top waistline of the pant. Now, if we slide this down, there are going to be patterns out there that have the welt end and not correspond to the waistline. So just follow the guidelines on the pattern that you are using. What's important to remember, however, is that there is a marking on the pattern for the facing piece to be attached, and you want that to be toward the top of the pocket bag. So just make sure as we stitch that piece on there that you don't flip that upside down and have that toward the bottom. That is going to be that facing piece that prevents show through of the pocket bag. And so here, if we kind of pull this aside, you'll see that facing piece, which we'll see on the back in a moment. And then, of course, we aren't going to see the pocket bag like we have here. This is the Welt Pocket pattern piece, and it's just a rectangle. As I mentioned, you can make your own and determine how wide or long you want that to be, but it's important that you're going to trace that opening onto your welt piece. This is what will be stitched into the pocket. Here we have the pocket piece with that facing stitched down, and it's going to be the wrong side of that facing is going to be attached to the pocket piece. Now, we have the marking for the welt on the back of our trouser pant, and it's really important that you have a very clear and precise placement line for that pocket. Now, it's unrealistic to expect our fabric piece to lay nice and flat because of this dart, and that's okay. Remember, we just want to make sure that that dart is above our placement line for the pocket like we have here. As you're sewing, what you want to do is kind of forget everything that's going on around the pocket and just focus on that straight placement line. So as we lay our fabric down, you can just kind of flatten it out with your hands and focus on the placement line. Really, your welt is all about your preparation, your marking, and the placement. Once you have those things and you do those really precise, then your results are going to be successful. So some of the tools that I use in marking my welt is just a nice sharp ruler and this chalk roller, which is really going to give me a nice crisp marking line. If I kind of roll this back and forth, you'll see that that's just a really nice precision straight line, and it's going to allow for that accuracy when we're placing that on the fabric. You want to use the top line of the welt, and you can just kind of fold that back and just make sure that you're lining those up so that they match. And I'm going to put a pin on either side of the welt. This is just to anchor it in place. Now, some people will baste at various stages of the welt pocket, and I do this depending on the level of sewing that I'm doing in the fabric. If I'm doing a lot of couture sewing with a lot of handwork, I would baste this, but this is a stable fabric, and a few pins in there, it's not going to shift, so that's going to hold it in place. All right, so now on the wrong side of our fabric, what we want to do is we want to take our pocket bag with that facing, and we want to line up that facing piece with the welt that's on the front. So this band right here, the facing, needs to fall over top of that welt on the front. Now, there is, on this particular Sasha pattern, there is a notch in the pattern that corresponds with the waistline. So that's an additional guide. If you don't have that on your pattern, focus first on lining up your facing piece, and then you can do the placement of the top of the pocket bag according to your preferences. So I'm going to put a couple pins there to hold it, just kind of double check, peek on either side to make sure they line up. That looks great. If you want, you can actually put a pin a little bit lower on the pocket bag just to hold it out of the way. You just don't want to catch that on the front side when you're sewing. Let's clip a thread here, flip this back over, and now what we are going to do is we are going to stitch around the welt opening. Now, it's usually suggested that you lower your stitch length to about a 1.5 millimeter. The smaller stitches are going to help with the precision, also when you turn this inside out and when you clip this open. So we're going to stitch and make sure you do a good back stitch at each corner. And this isn't really an area that I speed through in my sewing. I really am focusing on my needle hitting that nice crisp stitching line. Make sure you leave your needle in as you rotate, and watch really carefully that your needle doesn't go beyond your marking areas. Now I'm going to move a couple of things here just so they don't cause me to skew my fabric. Make sure my placement is where it needs to be, and then we'll continue down the other side. All right, and stop right on the end, and then we're going to do the last short side of the pocket. How you stitch this opening will determine the results that you get on your welt pocket. All right, the next step in our pocket is to cut the opening, but what we're going to do first is we're going to press down the top edge of the welt. That will just help, and you can see we've already got a beautiful crisp press here. Pressing now will allow a nice easy turn when we turn this to the inside, and just a beautiful finish. The next step is to cut open the welt, and it does help some people to draw a line down the center of the opening. You can eyeball this, but if it does help, you can certainly draw a cutting line, and you'll see that right here. Now, cutting the welt open really is kind of the scariest part. I try to grab an area of the pocket and just kind of fold it in half. get my scissors in there and clip it to get it started. You can use a blade, a sewing blade, if you want to get that started, but just as long as you're cutting through the center and then cut toward the edge of the welt opening, and you're going to stop about a half of an inch from the end and clip to the corners. It's very important that you clip right up to the corner. That's why those small stitches are really important. It's going to allow you to get right up in there and not worry about cutting a thread or having that come open. And this little tiny tab right here, we're going to stitch that down to anchor the side of the pocket. So you really do want to make sure that you're clipping right up to the end. Let's get the other side. Again, clip to but not through. And I know this is a little uneasy for some because you're cutting a hole in your garment, but if you've sewn that welt rectangular opening or whatever shape, it's going to have a great result. Now you can turn the bottom edge up and press that at this point just so that you get a little bit more of a crisp finish, but we're going to tuck the welt pocket to the inside, and you will need to press this. So it's not going to lay perfectly flat right away, but as you kind of work the edges that you've turned under, and we'll kind of poke this short side under, and I'll kind of put a little tension on that, but you'll see because we were able to clip right up to the edge, that's going to lay nice and flat and you're not going to have any puckers. We'll go ahead and pull this from the back side. Then we'll head over to the iron and press this nice and flat. Here's what the opening looks like on the outside of the fabric. You'll see that we've got a great crisp edge on there, and we want to make sure that we're not stretching this. However, there is a little give to the fabric at this point until we stabilize that welt. Now on the wrong side, we'll kind of see what that fabric looks like. And if we pull up the longer piece on the bottom, we want to press that seam open. And you'll see that that separates easily because we have clipped, and you'll see that we've got this nice edge. Now what we're going to do is we are going to form, if I can grab a hold of it here, we're going to form the welt, which is this inset piece. And it's important that what we're going to do is we're going to fold the long edge up, and I'm going to fold the top edge down. So we're going to make kind of an accordion pleat. So watch carefully. We're going to fold this edge down. Now what we want is that fold I'm going to make is going to line up just with the edge of the opening. We do not want it to go beyond. It'd be like on this example right here, if the welt extended beyond, it wouldn't lay correctly. So it needs to just match exactly. So let's go ahead and position everything here, and again, just line up with the edge. So we'll fold the longer welt piece up, and we're going to put a fold here and make sure it just matches the edge. I've repeated that a couple times because this is usually the part that some people get hung up on, how you place the pleat on your welt. Now I'm putting a pin on either side. You can baste this edge together if you want. I'm kind of pressing it with my fingers here. It's a nice stable cotton fabric, so if I flip this over, you'll be able to see that it holds its shape beautifully. So we'll kind of take a look at that. And how fun is that with a contrasting fabric? Now we can go in and stitch in the ditch right here to stabilize the lower edge of that welt. So I'm literally just going to use those tiny stitches and stitch right in the ditch, which the ditch is where the seam joins the other piece of fabric. And so I'm just going to go really carefully and line that up. Now you can do top stitching and do some decorative stitching all around that, but let's take a look on the back side. You'll see that we are able to pull our pins out and clip our threads, of course. We'll flatten this out. Now the next thing is, remember those little tabs when we clipped the front of the welt? We want to be able to stitch those down. Now when we stitch, we want to catch as much of that tab as we can to the facing piece right here. We do not want to catch it to the pocket bag. So I'm going to kind of pinch that and grab that with my fingers, flip that over and put it underneath the sewing machine, and again, as close to the edge as we can get. You can use a zipper foot. This fabric fits beautifully under the machine, so I don't really need a zipper foot. Just remember, get as close to the base of that tab as you can. Then we're going to go ahead and flip that over, and you'll see that that has anchored that edge. Now we're going to go ahead and do the other side as well. All right, here we go. So see, that anchors that edge and it's not really going anywhere. Looks great. If we want to add a buttonhole, we want to make sure we shift the pocket bag out of the way, and now's the time where we can put our buttonhole below the welt pocket. Well, we're almost done with our welt pocket. Before we stitch up the sides of the pocket bag, we have one final step, and that is to anchor the facing on the back side of the pocket so that we don't have an opening where our hand can go all the way up to the top of the pant. So notice what I'm going to do is I'm going to fold the pant fabric out of the way. I'm going to pull the upper part of the pocket, and I'm going to expose the full pocket bag. Pay close attention that I'm not going to sew this to any part of the pant. Instead, what I want to do is I want to stitch down on this facing if I haven't done so already. There is an opportunity to do that earlier in the welt formation, but if you haven't, you want to stitch as close as you can to the welt opening without stitching through it. So let's anchor these together. As I'm stitching this, I don't want to be right up next to the edge. I'm actually just going to stitch just below the opening of the pocket. And there I'm going to stop well away from the edge of the pocket. The next thing is that we also want to anchor, let's lay this out here, we want to anchor that top portion of the facing again so that it's attached just below this opening. So if we do the same thing, roll the pant out of the way, and here this is going to be exposed. We can fold at this point. There are a couple different ways to place it on the pattern. So I think what I'm going to do is show you like this, all right? And then what we're going to do is we're going to make sure that the pant is all out of the way, that these line up, and then we're going to stitch across the facing, making sure we're not catching any of the pretty part of the pocket. So with the pocket bag folded, we're able to fold the top of the pant down, and stitch across. Again, making sure that we stop at least a good ½ of an inch from the edge. Now what we can do is we can stitch down either side of the pocket bag to close that. But what happens here is that our pocket now is closed and we can't put our hand up inside the pocket. Joining me in this Nancy's Notions 101 tutorial. I hope you had fun learning how easy it is to create a welt pocket. Whether using a contrasting fabric or a traditional one-on-one matching fabric, it's an easy addition that will really add a professional flair to any wardrobe item. Well, join us in another Nancy's Notions wardrobe video lesson coming soon, so make sure that you like and subscribe so you'll be notified anytime a new video is available. We're always adding new technique as well as main pattern focused videos. So we'll see you in another edition of Wardrobe Builder.